High Commissioner Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of South Africa to India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. He came here only a couple of months ago. He was here more than a quarter century ago as a consular at the High Commission. And we are delighted to have you back here, High Commissioner. And incidentally, this is the first time that a person of Indian origin is being posted as High Commissioner of South Africa to India. A very yes, and congratulate you and welcome you, High Commissioner. And I welcome Mr. Rajiv Bhatia, who is our High Commissioner in South Africa, and also Mayank Singh, his Joint Secretary in charge of Eastern and Southern Africa. We are delighted to have you with us, Dr. Mrs. Singh, the High Commissioner's wife, and Cedric Cowdery, the Deputy High Commissioner, and our friend who has been ICCR's chief, and he was also posted there. I notice another diplomat sitting at the back. May I now invite our secretary, Mr. Nanda, to introduce our distinguished panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Venkat. As it is, our president has already briefly introduced all the distinguished panelists here. But let me begin with Mr. Singh, Mr. Mayank Singh. He joined the Indian Foreign Service in 2007. Currently, he is serving as the head of Africa desk in the Ministry of External Affairs. He has served in Moscow, Mauritius, where he oversaw India-Mauritius defense and security partnership and development partnership projects during the critical change of Mauritian leadership in 2014. He served as the Deputy Chief of Protocol for Ministry of External Affairs, has played an important role in conceptualizing and executing various high-level multilateral engagements such as Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, India-ASEAN Summit, BRICS Summit, and the International Solar Alliance Summit, which were held in India during this period. He has worked in the Permanent Mission of India to UN at New York. Most recently, he was India's Deputy High Commissioner to the Maldives, that oversaw the entire gamut of bilateral relations between India and Maldives, especially in the run-up to the 2023 presidential elections and the consequent change of the government and evolving nature of bilateral relations thereafter. He studied history and read law at Delhi University before joining the Foreign Service. And then I think Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia is well known to all of you. He's a distinguished fellow at Gateway House. That's a Bombay, right? Yeah. And he's former High Commissioner of India to South Africa. He has served as High Commissioner to Kenya and Lesotho. I think he was our ambassador to Myanmar, I think very important country from India's point of view. His book, India-Africa Relations, Changing Horizons, has received critical acclaim. He's a prolific columnist and popular speaker on India's foreign policy. He also was Director General of ICW, that is Indian Council of World Affairs from 2012 and 15. And finally, our the High Commissioner, Professor Anil Suklal, is High Commissioner Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of South Africa to India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. And as our President said, he is the first person of Indian origin to the land of his ancestors in this position. He was born in 1957 and educated in the University of what is known as the University of KwaZulu Natal. He has a PhD in Orient history, and before joining the government in 1995, he taught at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and the University of South Africa. In his 3-decade-long career in South African government, he has held several important positions across the globe. as ambassador to the European Union and was actively involved in South Africa's interactions at the United Nations in New York and Geneva, and with India and other countries in BRICS, IPSA, the Indian Ocean Rim, among others. He was honored with Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Award in 2019. So let's welcome you all, sir.
Thank you, Prakash. Excellency, it's your turn now. General statement. What do you want me to speak about? Speak about South Africa-India relations.
Okay.
You see, on the 1st of December, South Africa assumes presidency of G20. To mark that occasion, we have decided to have this discussion, special session on South Africa-India relations. May I now request the High Commissioner to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, my good friend Venkatji, for inviting me to the session. My colleague, Shri Mayank Singh, Joint Secretary from MEA. My good brother here, Rajiv Bhatia, whom I've known for a long time, and Shri Nandaji. And I must also acknowledge my good friend, Suresh Goyal, who served in South Africa, and all of you that are here and on the public platforms. You know, when you talk about India-South Africa relations, it's a good story to tell because of the long history we've had. And we always say that our relationship is forged in a common history of struggle and freedom, because both our countries have experienced subjugation and domination and exploitation. And we rallied against that, and today we have emerged as, I think, important role players from the global south, one from Asia, the other from Africa, that are playing an increasingly important role in shaping the new evolving global order that we see unfolding before us. Now, if you look at the history of South Africa and India, immediately you speak of Gandhiji. But even predating Gandhiji is my own history and that of my ancestors when, as part of the British Empire, both South Africa, the Union of South Africa then, and India, when slavery was abolished in 1834, immediately they introduced a new form of slavery and gave it the euphemism of indenture. It was another form of slavery. As early as 1835, Indian labor was being shipped to different parts of the world, basically to uphold the British Empire. And today, and I always say it was not by design, but rather by default. The British have created such a powerful force globally that is known as the Indian diaspora. And South Africa is part of that. From 1860 to 1911, the period of indenture, you had 152,000 Indians being shipped to South Africa, and my great-grandparents were part of that process to basically work on the sugar plantations in mainly KwaZulu-Natal. So you have the first stream of Indians arriving. Now, when you look at the Indian diaspora in South Africa, there was basically three streams that you can distinctly speak of. Those that went as indentured Indians, mainly from UP, Bihar, Tamil Nadu, and Andhra Pradesh. That is why the Indian community in South Africa, at least those emanating from indenture background, are from four linguistic groups: Tamil, Hindi, Telugu is widely spoken, and later on the Gujarati community came. So the second stream came as traders to service the first stream, the workers that decided after the 5 year of indenture, they had the choice of a passage back to India or remaining in South Africa. the value of the cost of the passage, we were given some land. And many chose to remain and make South Africa their home. So you had then a thriving Indian community, and you had the merchant class coming. And they were mainly from Gujarat. And that's how the Gujarati stream came into South Africa. But another stream that came was the professional class. As much as you had the traders coming to service the community there, many in the community, of course, got into problems and they needed professional services because this was not provided by the government of the day, whether it was education, whether it was health services, or whether it was legal services. And that's how you had Gandhi coming to South Africa. You had a young lawyer hired by one of the merchants in Durban to come and fight a legal case that the merchant was involved in. So you had this young lawyer coming there to fight this case. The question I normally raise when I reflect on our history is, had Gandhi not come to South Africa, would you have Gandhi that came back to India 21 years later, enriched by the philosophies that were evolved in the South African environment, that of Satyagraha and Ahimsa? Because those two philosophies evolved as a result of his transformation in what he experienced in South Africa. And how would that have impacted on India's freedom struggle if we didn't have the political Gandhi that was transformed from the young lawyer into the political activist, returning to India to take a very active part in India's freedom struggle? So therefore I say, in many senses, both our struggles are joined together by the umbilical cord. Gandhi's transformation to come here and lead your freedom struggle, but he also set in motion a political process in South Africa, having experienced firsthand the discrimination of the majority community, including the Indian community in South Africa, the exploitation and the inhumane treatment of the workers in the sugar plantations. Because if you look at the history of the indentured Indians, it was nothing but slavery, the conditions under which they lived, and the treatment by the white colonial masters. So you have that important link. But likewise, Gandhi politicized South Africa because the African National Congress, the first organized political movement, not just in South Africa, but in the African continent, was founded in 1912. But as early as 1894, a year after Gandhi arrived, he founded the Natal Indian Congress, the first political formation in South Africa, which was to impact on the African National Congress, because later they became Congress allies. The Natal Indian Congress was formed, and then the Transvaal Indian Congress, because Gandhi saw the need to organize oneself to agitate against the ruling elite of that time and the power of the collective, to champion the cause of those being exploited. And that itself impacted on the larger African psyche that led to the formation of the African National Congress some 18 years later. So you can see the impact of the Gandhi factor on South African politics or liberation struggle, and the Gandhi factor on India's political struggle and liberation. So that's the basis that ties us together and gives us this firm foundation upon which we build. Fast tracking a bit, coming to the period pre your own independence, you were the first country in 1946 that championed South Africa's isolation, the apartheid regime. The first country globally to impose sanctions on South Africa was India. You imposed economic sanctions on South Africa in 1946, and this was followed by comprehensive sanctions, which included cultural and economic sanctions and social sanctions against South Africa. And that, of course, in turn became a global movement because you, within the UN system, championed the cause of our liberation struggle, and you were a leading voice in that. So again, you played such a seminal role in our liberation and the freedoms that we enjoy today. India's hand is to be seen everywhere, in the role that you played. Within the first Asia-Africa Summit in Bandung in 1955, you gave us space. As a country, the African National Congress sent delegates there because it was under Jawaharlal Nehru. It was one of the initiators of the first Asia-Africa conference. And again, just as a newly liberated country, we were already thinking of the global south. So when you speak of India today as a voice of the global south, it is nothing new. You were the voice of the global south way back when we were not even, the major part of Africa was not even liberated. We were talking about liberation and the liberation of fellow countries in the global south. So I keep reminding my Indian colleagues, yes, you must and you are playing an important role in the global south. But remember, you occupied that post long ago, long ago. So we shouldn't forget a thread that joins us from the time of your own struggle and the role you played in the struggle of the global south to become independent states. As early as when we formed the the Organization of African Unity, the OAU, in 1963, there were only 32 African states that were sovereign states, only 32. And that will give you an idea that the journey wasn't an easy journey, it was a long journey, and India was part of that journey. So when you speak of the historical relationship between South Africa and India, it is also in many ways a template of the historical relationship between Africa and India. Africa being made part of the African Union during India's presidency of the G20 was a major, I think, takeaway of your presidency and correcting an injustice to Africa in excluding Africa from the G20 when it was elevated to a summit level in 2008. Put in the European Union there, but there was no space for the African Union. You rectified that wrong that was committed against the African Union. So you have this long history. The point I'm making, Venkat, is that you played such an important role in our struggle. And when we became a democracy, it was natural that diplomatic relations were formed. In 1993, we formally signed off on establishing diplomatic relations between our two countries. 94, you opened an embassy in Pretoria. In April 94, in October, we opened our embassy here in Delhi, having a presence once again in both the countries. Now, one of the unintended consequences of the sanctions by India against South Africa was that as an Indian community in the diaspora, we were the most isolated because there were no formal links between, rightfully so, and South Africa. So you had no interaction, including cultural interaction, because we were isolated and Indian musicians, sport persons, artists, teachers, and so forth come to South Africa. And that was why we became a very introverted community. But I think, as I think Rajiv will tell you, and Suresh also, community, we managed to preserve much of our culture and traditions and linkages through India that was so important for the survival of the community. And I think it was that basis that provided the sustenance for a very isolated community. So I think the beneficiary of democracy in South Africa and the normalization of relationship between India and South Africa, the Indian community was once more reconnected to the Indian environment and to India. And that, I think, has been a major boost in terms of relationship. President Mandela came here in 1995. Of course, even before that, you awarded OR Tambo the Order of, what was it called? Jawaharlal Nehru Peace Prize in recognition of the role that he played and the African National Congress. So that was the solidarity that was there. So in 95, when President Mandela came here on the state visit, and he was the chief guest at the Republic Day event, it was again recognition of the role he played, but also recognition of the strong bonds of friendship between our two countries. And we signed the Richfield Declaration that underpinned the strategic partnership between our two countries. And I think over the past 3 decades, this relationship has flourished. We have signed an innumerable number of agreements in a whole range of fields of cooperation, and it continues to flourish. We are still discussing with Sri Mayank Singh ji our one or two outstanding MOUs, which we are hoping to finalize. But I think more importantly is the people-to-people interaction also that flourished, apart from the intergovernmental relations. You know, as part of the isolation, South Africa was boycotted in the sporting. So when we were once again welcomed into the global arena, the first cricket match that took place between South Africa and any team globally was the Indian cricket team. And I think that's again acknowledgement of the role that you played in bringing the isolation of South Africa in every dimension of life and having the desired effect on the apartheid regime. And I think in recognition of that, it was natural that the first international match that we played, once being embraced again by the international community, was with the Indian cricket team. And that's why we have such a good rivalry today on the cricket field. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the role of sport in deepening relationship. I think sport diplomacy is such a powerful weapon. We have seen it in South Africa in terms of nation building, how sport has brought communities together. Apartheid stratified us into race groups, and we were very divided, South Africa. But in 1995, when we were in the finals of the Rugby World Cup, and rugby was always associated as a sport of the white man and as a sport of the oppressor. And you would never see a black South African supporting the national team. But in 1995, President Mandela, you know, he went to the change room during the interval because South Africa was not doing too well. The All Blacks were very powerful. We were playing them, and he gave them a pep talk. And you had a changed Springbok team that came onto the field, and we won the World Cup. But the whole of South Africa, doesn't matter what color or hue you were, all of them rallied behind the rugby team. And thereafter, rugby became such a popular sport throughout South Africa. My son doesn't play rugby, but when the Springboks play, he's crazy about them. I'm not a big rugby fan, uh, but I'm just using sport. When the Proteas play against India at the last final, where we almost beat you, I think in the end we decided no, let India win this. It's such a fantastic medium of bringing nations and people together. And that continues to play such a powerful role in bringing our countries together. And I think our relationship is on a very solid basis. But I think we need to, I always say when you're very good friends, close friends, you start taking each other for granted. And I think the relationship needs some new energy from both sides because the potential is so vast. And economic relationship, even though I think we are India's largest trade on the African continent, I believe it's still in its infancy. The opportunities for scaling up our economic interaction is vast. For Indian companies, opportunities in South Africa and through the African Continental Free Trade Area is now in play. I believe you have tremendous every Indian company that I've been meeting, and I think in the 2 months I've been there, Mr. Crowley will tell you I'm having on average 2 meetings a day with the government sector. It's such a great appetite from the Indian side to want to enter the African market, to want to be in South Africa, and equally so from the South African side. Before coming here, I had several meetings addressing the business community. And I said to our Black Business Council, BBC as they are called, one of the meetings, I said, "You fast asleep." I said that, as a historian, you'll always learn that the ancient world was dominated by the Romans. And that's why you had the terminology, all roads. Then in the modern era, post-industrialization, all roads led to Washington. In the more recent period, turn of the millennium, all roads led to Beijing. And I've been saying for the past decade or so, all roads lead to Delhi because the whole world is converging. And that's what I said to my South African colleagues across the board. The whole world is descending here. You know, I've had the privilege of managing our relations with Asia for a major part of our democracy. And I've traveled as widely in China as I have in India over the years. And my wife will bear this out. Up to about 2015, 2016, whenever I should go to China, very high presence of, well, let me say Europeans. By Europeans, I mean people from the north. You'd see them in hotels. You'll see them everywhere. And when I should come to India, you wouldn't see that visibility. But in the past 7 or 8 years, whenever I travel to, I would on average travel to China about 3 times a year, India 3 times as well. I've seen a major shift. You hardly see people in China today. I was in Beijing in March, and before that, I was in China in December, and last year I had about 3 times. It's dried up. Now we are currently staying at Taj Mansingh, and before that, we were at Taj Palace. I've over the past few years, such a visible presence of Westerners in India today. Much, much more. It's dried up in China. You see it here because they all are realizing this is where opportunity lies, and this is where you have a free market system where you can really do business, you can make money. And this is what I'm saying to the South African business. You have been asleep. The compass has shifted. It's time that you start looking to India and the opportunities that it provides. And I experienced this firsthand. We were reflecting that the last time I served here, when I met Sri Venkatji, was some 26 years ago. The India years ago that I experienced and the India of today are two different countries. Not just the countries, but the people, the mindset, the psyche. It's a very, very changed India today. Well, show off yourself, confident what you want on the world stage, and I think you're also very blessed with excellent leadership. And I think I see the relationship between India and South Africa only getting stronger, and we will come even closer together as we have a common agenda in as we did during your G20 presidency, and we will. The global South will lead the change in terms of reshaping a more equitable, just, and inclusive world. And it has an important leadership role to play in that. And I believe as a partner, South Africa and the African continent has an important role to play in that. So I'm very confident that this relationship will constantly grow and it will constantly deepen. But also a lot depends on the energy we put into it. Complacency should not set in. We have an important role to play together. We are partners within BRICS. We are partners in IPSA. We are partners in the Indian Ocean Rim Association. We are partners within the basic group climate change discussions. We are solid partners within the UN system, calling for the reform of the UN architecture, especially the Security Council. We have the same view as IPSA countries. We have been championing that. And we are the true custodians of democracy. We have an unfortunate situation today in the global environment. Countries that are not democratic are speaking as the leaders of democracy. So I think we have an important role to preserve what democracy is really about. And that's why we came together as Brazil, India, and South Africa. Let me leave it there, Shri Venkatji.
Thank you, Anil. May I now invite Rajiv Bhatia, who has been our High Commissioner in South Africa, to speak after you. Yeah, he'll speak after you.
honored to be here on this very special occasion. Let me thank FCC for taking this initiative. Very timely initiative indeed, Venkat. And I want to present my warm congratulations to the High Commissioner, and also my warm thanks to Joint Secretary Mayank Singh to be here and to give me the honor to speak before him. I actually speak only for, let us say, the think tank community, and therefore I can claim to have a little bit more freedom these days than I used to have in the past. Thank you, High Commissioner, for the master class in the history of India-South Africa relations. The way you have described and paid tribute to Mahatma Gandhi is heartwarming. But let me also recall from my own life book. The year was 1990. I was a young diplomat here posted in Delhi. I was director in the external publicity division. And we had something to do with organizing a big public reception for Nelson Mandela when he came. That was his first visit, long before he became the president. But soon after, he was released from prison after 27 years of incarceration. And I still remember very vividly this large hall, Indraprastha Stadium, thousands and thousands of people. And as a minor organizer, I was sitting obviously as far as possible from the stage. And I remember two thoughts came to my mind on that evening. One was they had gone and killed Mahatma Gandhi before I was born. And so I felt I was seeing Gandhi of our age, of our time. He was not Africa's Gandhi, he was Gandhi of our age. And the second thought came, would I ever have a chance to even touch him or talk to him for a minute? And obviously, I had done some good karma because 16 years later, I was appointed India's High Commissioner to South Africa. By then, Mandela was no longer the president, but he had more time. And so one had the great fortune and privilege to, first of all, have a one-to-one conversation with him, which was absolutely priceless, and then be exposed to him on a number of subsequent occasions as well. And I've written everywhere as to how those interactions taught me the secret of his leadership, his empathy, his humor, his effortless ability to connect with whoever you may be, and breaking down the walls of formality. That was his specialty. So, I mean, just to give you an example, and I must quickly run through my some talking points, serious talking points. Uh, he had the ability to talk to a complete stranger. India's High Commissioner is saying, he said, "So, High Commissioner, what do you think about Bob?" He was referring to Zimbabwe's leader, Robert Mugabe. So I said, "Excellency, I'm not exactly on first term, name term with the gentleman, but you tell me what you think about him," and so on. The point I'm making is India and South Africa are linked by common icons, common ideas, and common interests. And therefore, I'm really encouraged by what the High Commissioner just said, that we have achieved a lot, but there is a lot to be achieved. And this was also Mandela's famous saying. He always said that when you have scaled a new height, that is when you see how many more peaks you have to scale in future. So let that Mandela spirit guide India South Africa relations. It's very easy for scholars and diplomats to produce a long list of achievements. That was then. The question is, what are we going to do now and in the future? And here, I can only say that the strategic partnership, and this is one of the earliest strategic partnerships that India established back in 1997. I think it needs to be really made now a special strategic partnership. I think it needs, at the least, an annual summit meeting between the President of South Africa and Prime Minister of India. There's absolutely no reason why 4 or 5 years must elapse before the two leaders will find half a day to sit down and discuss everything that may be on their mind. Uh, Secondly, also, it's very important to have regular joint commission meetings. We all know that regularity creates accountability, creates activism. It strengthens and empowers those diplomats and those civil servants who want to do good for the relationship. So this institutional mechanism and other mechanism, they must be more regular. And I think uh, it's also important that while think tanks in the two countries, they keep chugging along, but they can do much more if there is genuine support and encouragement from the authorities. So this is what I would like to say on the bilateral side. On the plurilateral or multilateral side, I have only three very brief suggestions to make. First is on BRICS, we have worked together, but we must also recognize that sometimes misunderstandings arise. And essentially, therefore, there is a case for deeper and a stronger synergy between our two countries. I think BRICS is now already expanded into 9 or 10 countries, and now a long list of partner countries has been prepared. Professor Anil Suklal is the master of BRICS. He ran the whole summit with the help of obviously his colleagues beautifully. So the point I'm making is we have to have a balance between expansion and intensification of cooperation within the body. You can expand it limitlessly, but then will it be able to achieve anything? So that balancing has to be done, and that is only possible if Pretoria and New Delhi work in tandem and talk to each other candidly and frankly. My second point, very quickly, is about IPSA, and this is an unconventional view I'm putting forward. IPSA has established its relevance. It has validated itself over the years, even though it has not been as active as we had thought initially, but it is there. Every time in G20 there is a problem, IPSA spirit plays a role and helps. But maybe now in this decade, things have changed. There is one country in Asia which is becoming a significant political player. It is the country which has good relations with South Africa. It's a country which is set to step up its relations with India. And it is a country which, like us, hosted the G20 summit. I'm making a plea that if it is not too much of a problem to the government's concerned, they could consider involving Indonesia in some fashion in IPSA. You don't even have to change the acronym. But there is a commonality, and you can bring more energy, to use your own word, into this plurilateral. And finally, G20, you have already said, I do not have to add anything that you have mentioned. But I think we need South Africa's help to plug the case that in 2025, India Africa Forum Summit must take place. I think our friends in Africa, Nigeria, South Africa, Algeria, other countries, they must step forward and convey to the African Union as to what India has done for it. And that this Forum Summit is not for India's benefit. It is largely for Africa's benefit. You know, whatever are the technical hurdles, they must be removed. And there is no question if South Africa very clearly across to the leadership of African Union, it will happen. Thank you very much, dear friends.
Thank you, Rajiv. May I now invite Mayank Singh to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Venkatji, for inviting me to this August gathering. And a big word of gratitude to FCC for organizing this event. My congratulations to High Commissioner Anil Suklal for taking over this important assignment, and especially at a time when South Africa is planning to take over the presidency of G20 in another 2 days. Um, I would also like to acknowledge on the podium Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, a distinguished colleague and an exceptional diplomat who served with across 4 countries. Um, the reason I wanted to go last is because you basically find that all the points have already been covered by distinguished speakers before you, and you don't have a lot on your shoulders to basically finish the conversation with. Be that as it may, I would just like to reiterate a few points and try to, link it with my own experiences of what Ambassador Bhatia and Ambassador Suklal have said. Um, I I've served in Mauritius, which is also a Girmitia country, so to speak. The word Girmitia, if anyone would be interested to know, comes from the word agreement, which is basically pronounced as Girmit by people who signed that agreement, which was basically, another sanitized version of perpetuating slavery. And having served in that country, it's an experience to watch the journey of the Indian diaspora across this world, and how they have over the generations not only survived but thrived, prospered, and kept their traditions, their culture, their spirit alive. And it is obviously a matter of great pride for us when, as Indian diplomats, we come across these stories of great resolve and great enterprise. Um, to that end, I would also like to say that we do share a common heritage as far as the struggle against colonialism and injustice is concerned, both India and South Africa, in many ways which were different, but in ways which were united in spirit. We have heard, the journey of the South African nation as a community often divided, often at war with each other, emerging as a solid nation and a solid country united behind common leadership. I would not go into the depths of our bilateral relationship, has already been very aptly summarized by Ambassador Suklal. But I would say that I do agree with what he said, that yes, there are a lot of landmarks that we have achieved in the last 30 odd years. But if I were to give a very honest assessment of where we are today, it is clearly not enough. It is, let's just say that it is below potential. I mean, we have a term in our neighborhood foreign policy where we say that, for us it's neighborhood first, and within the neighborhood, there are specific countries which are special. In that spirit, I can say that for us, Africa has always been a very special continent, and within Africa, at the risk of perhaps offending some other countries, I would say that South Africa is special. It has always been, for reasons which are obvious, and for reasons which are yet to be discovered. So to that end, I would say that I have just taken over. I have still a lot of ground to cover as far as working on this relationship is concerned. But I do intend to utilize my time here to ensure that a lot of promise which this relationship holds is realized and is fulfilled in the coming years. I would also like to dwell on what Ambassador Bhatia said about the multilateral and the plurilateral equations. Again, drawing upon what my experiences were in New York, where we were generally dealing with all 193 odd countries, I would always come back to the same conclusion that no matter what you were doing in the multilateral sphere, eventually boiled down to how the capitals coordinate with each other, with how your bilateral relationship is at the end of the day, and that transcends all. And that is why when Ambassador Bhatia said that within those plurilateral bodies, there have been certain times when the the relationship really hasn't lived up to its potential. It is unfortunately true, and I just like to say that with the expansion of these bodies, I think it is important that we do not lose the main ambition of what got us in that grouping to begin with. And it is incumbent on us to try and coordinate that much better, that much closer, to ensure that the original aim and objective of the grouping stays relevant and stays intact. Talking about the role of South Africa as the G20 president, I would just like to say that we ourselves had a very hectic last year. For us, it was I would say a landmark, step in our journey to in mainstreaming the aspirations and the voice of the global South. And the main hallmark of that particular process was inclusion of the African Union as a member of the G20. To that end, I would just like to place it on record that whatever our agenda has been with regard to mainstreaming of the aspirations of the global South, South Africa has been a steadfast partner in all our endeavors, and I really hope and I wish that India would return the favor in the coming year and would prove itself to be an invaluable partner in shaping the aspirations and agenda of the global South under the leadership of South Africa. I would stop here and give the floor back to Sri Venkat. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayank. Anil, I have a couple of questions. South Africa is one of the most beautiful countries in the world. I had the privilege of going there 4 times. Last year, only 16,000 Indians could go to South Africa on a holiday, even though 27 million Indians go on a holiday across the globe and spend more than $30 billion. One of the reasons is there are no direct flights between India and South Africa. You would go via Addis Ababa or Doha or Dubai, and it takes that much longer. There used to be direct flights earlier. Will the resumption of direct flights between our 2 countries be a priority during your time in Delhi? Anil, number 1. Number 2 is a lot of South Africans. South Africa is the country where you have 6th largest Indian origin community living there after the United States, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Malaysia and Canada. Now, there has been a movement or a campaign here that we should allow people of Indian origin free access. A visa-free regime should be introduced so that people of Indian origin, wherever they may be living, South Africa, 32 million people of Indian origin living in 200 countries. Would you push for a regime where Indians living anywhere on the planet, including South Africa, 1.7 million, being allowed to come to India without facing the hassles of applying for a visa and all that? Would that be one of your plans while you are in India, Anil?
No, thanks, Venkatji. Firstly, we had 89,000 Indian visitors to South Africa last year. So, in fact, but that's still small. Pre-COVID, the number was about 120,000. But we did have, uh, I think, up to about 2017, direct flights between Johannesburg and Mumbai. Uh, it's an 8-hour flight, the same time it takes from Johannesburg to Dubai, the same time to Mumbai. But unfortunately, we had at one stage South African Airways, Jet Airways, even Air India in the early period, all having direct flights between our two countries. For various reasons, those flights were discontinued. It's very high up on my agenda. I know Indian High Commissioner in Pretoria, Shri Prabhat Kumar, is also lobbying on the South African side. But we have our Minister of Tourism arriving here this weekend, and she's coming on a tourism roadshow. And she specifically asked to meet with Air India, SpiceJet, and Indigo. And she's meeting all three of them, specifically to discuss a direct flight between our two countries. I'm optimistic. The numbers are there. I believe that 89, 90,000 Indian visitors and about 50,000 South Africans coming to India, that itself warrants a direct flight. The market is there. But I think there has to be support from both sides for us to get this direct flight. And I'm convinced that it will come fairly soon, because there's lobbying from both parties, from the Indian side and the South African side. The statistics speak for itself. We are introducing what we call the Trusted Tour Operator Scheme from January for India to entice more Indian tourists to come to South Africa. And I believe that if the visa regime is easier, if we have direct flights, I am sure that during my tenure here, we'll more than double the numbers of visitors from both sides. As on the South African side, there's a great interest from especially the Indian community to find the roots. The Indian community today is far more affluent, and they want to go back and trace the history. And there's high level of interest of them wanting to come to India and find where their ancestry is from. So you have that high level of interest. As I said, from the business sector, across the board in South Africa, everyone is saying we want it. Right? And this side, you are saying the same. So you can see that there's high level engagement to try and make sure we get a direct flight. It's needed. On visa-free regime, I think that's an issue for the Indian government. It'll be very nice if we can just come to India, not requiring a visa. But of course, I think in the world of bilateral relations, we work on reciprocity. I think as much as you would want, we'd want South Africans to come freely to India, I think India would want the same for their citizens to freely enter South Africa. And I think as good, trusted friends, that's something we should work towards collectively to make travel between our people far easier because of the vast potential that exists, especially on the tourism front. If we make it easier, I'm sure on both sides, you would find a very scaled up increase of tourism, of business people, and just visitors in general.
I have one more question to ask. India does not grant dual citizenship. You have 32 million Indians spread across 200 countries. Their total assets are now estimated between $2 trillion and $3 trillion. And if dual citizenship is granted to people of Indian origin living globally, a lot of investments would come into this country, and people of Indian origin will feel comfortable coming here, because when the Indian Prime Minister goes, the kind of attention he attracts from the diaspora is really very impressive. What are your views on this, that India should consider granting dual citizenship to people of Indian origin living globally?
I think again, this is a matter for the Indian government. Uh, I can't speak of for the diaspora as a whole, but I think what is important, and I think it's a point Prime Minister Modi ji makes whenever he goes to countries, like he was in Guyana recently, when he was in South Africa last year, make a contribution to the country that you are part of. I'm South African in every sense of the word. I'm fortunate I have a Indian heritage, and I'm very proud of that as well. But I'm born and raised in South Africa. I'm African in every sense of the word. And I think if you look at the diaspora as a whole, and I've been very fortunate. In my academic career, one of my focus area was on the diaspora. I've traveled to most of these. I've been to Guyana, to Trinidad, to Fiji, and interacted with the diaspora community. I'm giving a lecture tomorrow online, Banaras University, on the Indian diaspora. I think for the majority of the diaspora Indians, including South Africa, 80% plus are ordinary folks. They don't have the means, the economic means, to want to even go abroad as much as they want to. You have a small band, maybe 20%, that are economically well endowed, that take advantage of things like OCI and come here, buy property, and so forth. If you have a crisis in a country, I've seen it in Guyana, we've seen it in South Africa, we've seen it in places like Uganda and others. 90% of those people are either Ugandans, they are South Africans, they are Trinidadians, they're Guyanese. That's the national identity. That's the home. That's where the future is, and that's the only reality they know. So I don't think the issue of dual citizenship is going to impact on the majority of the diaspora that are from the Girmedia community, because we are part and parcel of where we have been born. Our identity are from that respective countries. And I think Modi ji is right, that your contribution should be to that country where you are born and raised. And as I say, my Janma Bhumi is South Africa. I'm born and raised there. But my Dharma Bhumi is India, because my Dharma comes from here. No one can take that identity away from me. That's my reality. I straddle two worlds, but my reality is Africa, and I'm African in every sense of the word.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes. Yes, please. Surajji? Yeah.
Sure. But if I'm permitted, I just wanted to say a few things here. And I was actually encouraged by what you mentioned. And Anil, I'm following on the informality of having known you earlier. So I will address you, Mr. High Commissioner, at a more formal occasion. You see, you mentioned about seeing lots of foreigners in India now when you travel to Delhi, etc., etc. I have served in South Africa for 4 years, and I was in Johannesburg, which is the business capital of South Africa, and therefore I had the good fortune to work on the commercial ties between India and South Africa at that time. Now, when you say that you see lots of foreigners, and obviously when you say foreigners, it can't be a person like you because you can mistake him for an Indian. So that foreigner must be either with a white skin or something who can be identified as a foreigner. I really wonder why there are not so many business people from South Africa traveling to India. Now, I'm saying that simply because we, and Madam, what you said to in the empty room, we need new visibility in the relationship. I would say not just visibility, we need a new life in the relationship. We cannot just keep, I'm sorry to say, but very often we fall back on the cliches. of the shared civilization, shared history, common background, this and that. We need to go beyond that. We need to build up on all that. And when we want to build up on that, I think that one of the most obvious things is really working on our capabilities, sharing those capabilities, working together. Business is one of them. Economy, development, growth, people's aspiration. 80% people of the people of Indian origin in South Africa, they don't have the means to travel abroad. So do we. I mean, just about before I joined the foreign service, it was difficult for me to imagine that I could board a flight and go anywhere, even within India. So what I'm requesting, Anil, you as the High Commissioner, because it was two things. One is empathy for the relationship. And that empathy is very important unless you are passionate about developing the relationship. You may have the best of the intentions. But we will somehow say that, nahi hua to nahi hua. We don't want that kind of a thing. So I'm sure that both Indian. So work on that relationship. And I think the most tangible component of the relationship would be economy, trade. Through unilateral mechanism, bilaterally, and if I may say, having worked in New York myself, bilateral and multilateral or unilateral, they both feed on each other. I think South Africa, when we work together in IPSA, it does feed on the bilateral relationship also. So work on that kind of a commercial, economic component of the relationship. That is number one. Tourism is good. People, academic component. I don't see many people coming from South Africa to India or from India to South Africa. So I'm just saying that my request to you as a High Commissioner, you have the empathy. Now you need to develop on the component of the relationship, and I'm sure you will do.
Yeah, please.
I fully agree with you, Suresh. One of the things I did when I was informed I'm appointed as High Commissioner, and having worked so long on this relationship, I was not satisfied. I had a true feel of why we're not realizing our economic potential. And I spoke to a number of Indian businesses and South African businesses. I attended 3 major meetings in 3 different cities. In Durban, we invited the Indian companies that are active in South Africa to a meeting together with the business community from within the region. We had about 100 plus. And I wanted to listen from them. What is it we need to do? We repeated that exercise in Cape Town and had about the same turnout. And we did it jointly with the Consul General in Johannesburg. We had an excellent turnout. I think it was in Wonders Club. And that's where I said to South African businesses, you're fast asleep. Here's a buoyant market, and everyone sees what is happening there. Why are you not there? Why are you absent from the space? Part of the reason is when we think of Asia, the general South African business community, the mind is focused on one country. They think there's only opportunities there. And they, as I said earlier, they haven't realized the compass has shifted. And I was very frank with them. And some of them came after that and said, look, what you said is true. You have actually opened our minds. What was then the result of all of this? And it mustn't be left to government alone to drive this relationship. Government can do only so much. The private sector and other entities have an equally important role to drive this relationship. So what I found is that, as I've said, you've got about 130 Indian companies in South Africa, but just about 20 South African companies here. And I was trying to understand what are the impediments. And a lot of it is out of ignorance. They don't understand they still think of India as India of 20 plus years ago, and not seeing what is happening in this space. And the private sector launched what is called the India-South Africa Chamber of Commerce. as a vehicle, mainly to assist South African and not focusing on the multinationals. Multinationals don't need us. They run on their own steam. They're powerful today. As you know, the world today, look at what's happening with Elon Musk and USA. The power of multinationals to actually influence governments. They open doors themselves and go into spaces themselves. They have the means. But what about the MSME sector? Who's taking care of them? And that's the engine of our economies. South Africa, Africa as a whole, your economy itself. I mean, the cooperative meeting that's taking place this very week, our deputy minister is here attending that. And I spoke to her, and she said, look, this has been such a fantastic eye-opener for us in terms of what is happening within India in the cooperative space. So what we are having, the last time we had a major economic interaction between our two countries was in 2018, when Ruchira Kamboj, the then High Commissioner, got Minister Piyush Goyal to South Africa, and we had a joint trade meeting. That was over 6 years ago. Now, if we are strategic partners, it can't be that you have such an interaction once in 6 years. So we have about 40 South African businesses arriving this weekend here. We have an India-South Africa business conclave taking place on the 2nd of December here at Taj Mansingh. And that delegation, we're partnering with FICCI here. And that same delegation, the South African delegation, together with our Minister of Tourism, she's part of it. We're going to Mumbai. We have partnered with CII in Mumbai. I was just speaking to the CII colleagues. Cedric and I were online with them just prior to coming in. And both the meetings are oversubscribed. That's the level of interest. And from the South African side, not driven by government. Of course, the High Commission was instrumental in getting this off the ground, but totally private sector driven. They are paying their own fares, paying their own cost to come and see what is happening here. Some of them are coming with business deals. We are signing about 3 or 4 MOUs in this meeting, and it's driven totally by private sector. So for me, this is a major focus, and I'm saying that I can't wait just for us as governments to do it. We will do what we have to do, and I'm sure we will do that collectively with Sri Mayank assistance here and our colleagues at MEA. We will continue pushing that intergovernmental cooperation. But I believe the private sector, like what is happening in India, your private sector is driving your growth as much as government has created that enabling environment and giving you the support you need. But that space is being driven by the energy that they provide in powering your economy. And I want to see our private sector on both sides powering this relationship. We've already got agreement. You know, I've just arrived here. We're having these 2 events. I had the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation come to see me. I was invited to, Primus, the think tank, to speak on DPI and India's experience of DPI and its relevance to the global south, to speak on a platform where Sri Amitabh Khan was speaking. And I gave an African perspective of how India can play a role in powering Africa's development using digitization. And I've said this to Sri Damu Ravi. I think I've said it to Sri Mayank Singh. And by the way, I was at an Africa group meeting today, my first Africa group meeting. And in all my interactions in my courtesy with African ambassadors, I said we need to approach India and say that we want the summit. As much as India wanted, we want it. I was at the last India-Africa Forum Summit when it took place in Delhi. I was part of the South African delegation. And what was agreed at the Africa Group meeting today is that the chair of the group, Ambassador of Mozambique, will write on behalf of the group to MEA to say we want a meeting to discuss the India-Africa Forum. So the appetite is as much from the African side as much as India wants to convene this forum. So I'm saying that there are a number of initiatives. So the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who I bumped into there at that meeting of the DPI, they said they want to come and see me. It was actually my wife after the meeting, had a discussion. They said, no, we want to come and have a discussion with you. So our president used the term DPI in his State of Nation address when he was re-elected as president and opened parliament. And for the first time, I think the Indian public heard this term, DPI, Digital Public Infrastructure. He's put it into the South African psyche. And I said this is because of the direct exposure of President Ramaphosa to what India was doing in this space and as it was profiled during G20 presidency. Now, he created an interdepartmental task team. There's about 8 departments. And they have written now to Damu Ravi, say that the Director General, who is the person in charge, equivalent to your secretary in the presidency, is leading a team of 30 South African officials to come and look at the role that digitization has played in transforming Indian society, especially as it impacts on the public services sector. So we have that team arriving on the weekend, as much as we have the tourism minister here, and as much as we have about 40 South African businesses arriving here on the weekend. So I'm saying that on many fronts, and what we agreed with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I said, look, let's ask the Indian government that if and when the IAFs take place, make digitization, sharing India's experience with Africa one of the key focus areas. So I proposed to them, why don't we do a workshop together with the Africa Group, look at digitization in Africa in partnership with India. And we're going to have that workshop in February, looking at that. And the foundation has agreed to work with us and to interact with the Indian government entities. And I put that idea out today to the Africa Group, and they were very happy to support the initiative. So I'm saying slowly we are starting to impact on areas that have tangible benefits. And you're right, the history and so forth is important. It's a base for us to build, and a base that gives us energy to move forward. But moving forward, there has to be tangible outcomes for our people and benefits for our countries.
I am Ashok B.
Ashok.
Sharma, a freelance columnist. My question is to Your Excellency, Professor Anil. South Africa is slated to host G20. How much of G20 agenda, Delhi Declaration, you are going to focus on, as India is a part of Troika? Next question is, South Africa has dragged Israel to the International Court for genocide. Now there is a ceasefire accord between Lebanon and Israel. So are you going to change your stand or modify it? This is my question.
On the question of G20 agenda, I think within the G20, we've been very fortunate because when South Africa assumes the chair for 2025, we'd have had 4 countries of the global south, one after the other, having the presidency of the G20. And if you look at Indonesia's presidency in 2022, and if you look at the themes that have been running through, Indonesia took over the G20 at a very difficult moment. We were just coming out of COVID. And that's why the theme was recover together, recover stronger. Because the whole focus was on the health infrastructure globally and how it impacted on all segments of human life, not just the health sector, but the economic sector and others, and the impact it had. Following that, of course, we had a very successful G20 presidency of India. And I think already when Indonesia was taking the chair, there was informal discussions between all of us that we have a moment here in the history of G20 since its inception in 2008 at summit level to coordinate the agenda of the Global South. And that is why you also built on what Indonesia put on the table. And your theme, One Earth, One Family, One Future, Vasudeva Kutumbakam, precisely focused on human life and elevating the status of the poorest of the poor. And during your focus, I mean, you had a very strong declaration that featured the voice of the Global South. You introduced into the G20 for the first time the Voice of the Global South Summit that was chaired by Prime Minister Modi. And I think that was a brilliant masterstroke to elevate the Global South into the leadership role of the G20. Because G20, as much as it is those 19 countries plus now, of course, true, but prior to African Union, was still a very stratified G20. Cedric was this sous Sherpa when I was Sherpa for G20. So we have the good insights into how G20 functions. You'd have a caucus of the G7 to caucus positions. Then we decided as BRICS, we must caucus as well. Then you have the EMDC group caucusing positions. So it was always about political positioning in terms of issues you support and issues you put on the table. Now, South Africa, for example, we put on the table illicit financial flows because Africa is such a major casualty in terms of the volumes of capital that illicitly flows out of the country. If prevented, could address the developmental challenges. So putting the development agenda at the center stage, you did that so successfully. Putting the Global South at center stage, you did that so successfully. The declaration on digitization that you put on the table, and as I indicated earlier on, elevating the role of digitization. And the fact that Prime Minister Modi said openly, all of the new innovations and technologies that India has, we will share openly with the Global South. Now, do you ever hear a country of the Global North saying, we will share whatever we've got, even if it's innovation? They will talk about IP first before they can even start sharing. So I'm saying that we've been very fortunate. So South Africa will take forward. Our theme for G20 is solidarity, equality, and sustainability. You had sustainable development as one of your major focus because that SDG agenda has fallen by the wayside. As the Rio Declaration rightfully pointed out, we're only 17% on track in achieving the SDGs. That's just around the corner. We're not going to achieve it. And who are the casualties? Its casualties are from the Global South. One of the major issues you championed, already foreseeing the outcome of COP29, was climate financing. And you made out a case already last year during your presidency to upscale that. But we have seen what's happened in COP29 now and what happened around climate financing. So there's no sincerity in addressing the issues that are critical to the development of the Global South. Every tool that can be used to prevent our rise is embedded there. Cedric will tell you, when we raised some of these issues in terms of technology sharing, immediately the Global North would say, but there are IP issues associated here. And here you have a country like India that's saying whatever new innovations we have in digitization, we'll share with the whole of the Global South. There's no such thing as IP. So it's a different mindset. So I'm confident that, sometimes they say a picture tells 1,000 stories. Go and look at the G20 summit pictures of the leaders, the family photo, from 2008 to say about 2020, COVID we didn't have, to 2021 or so. And look at the family photo of this year. Look at who's in the front row, the leaders. It's mainly leaders of the Global South. Your leaders of a Global North are standing on the second level, or some of them not even turning up for the family photo, for whatever reason. But I'm saying there's a shift. There's a shift in the leadership of the G20. And this has been affected over these past 3 or 4 G20 presidencies. And you will see during South Africa's presidency a continuation of issues started from Indonesia, going into India and now Brazil and into the South African presidency. Look, on the Israeli issue, you must understand that there has been, a very strong historical relationship between the African National Congress and Fatah. That has been there since time immemorial, since we were both in a common struggle. Within the ANC, those that were in exile, and we'd always say that it's far easier. The Palestinian will get statehood, and South Africa will not see a free, democratic South Africa, because that's how dark in the 80s the South Africa looked like during our period of struggle. It seemed like when you started having the Oslo Accords and all of these agreements that Palestine may actually get a two-state solution. But South Africa, what was happening in the 80s was extremely, extremely difficult. And we never thought that Mandela would be freed. The liberation organizations would be unbanned, and that will eventually move into a CODESA where we bring all parties together to talk about a united South Africa. So you have this historical linkage. And Mandela said, as long as Palestine is not free, South Africa is not fully free. He's on record of saying this because of the solidarity we had between each other. So it was against this backdrop that you should understand the reason why South Africa has taken such an activist position vis-a-vis Palestinian statehood. For us, we fully recognize the right of Israeli statehood as much as we do the Palestinian. And that's why we say we believe in a two-state solution, living Israelis and Palestinian living side by side as per the 4th of June 1967 border agreement. And we believe in that. And we believe that is the future, a two-state solution. There's no winners in a war. Whether it's the Russia-Ukraine situation, whether it's what's happening in Gaza today, we have seen there are only losers. There's no such thing that someone comes out winning a war today. The world has changed dramatically. And I think for us, it is this moral compulsion on the part of South Africa and the historical relationship we've enjoyed between the people of Palestine and South Africa during our dark days that has been the reason for this activist movement. I think the peace agreement that was struck now between Lebanon and Israel is a positive sign. I believe that we'll see perhaps more movement towards peace. Prime Minister Modi ji said it very clearly during your presidency. Now is not the time for war. And that is rightfully so. War has no place in the current environment. We all need to do our little bit in moving towards diplomacy, negotiations, drawing on our own experience. That's the only way you're going to find a resolution to challenges that exist today. The barrel of the gun has never solved any situation for a lasting, sustainable peace. And we firmly believe that until the issue of statehood is addressed effectively, you will not have peace in that part of the world.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Just wanted if you could give us an understanding, because we get to hear a lot about BRICS currency. A float we talked about with 40% gold, rest with other BRICS country currencies. Is it, a dead child, or conversations are still on? And what are the apprehensions and, stuff like that?
Look, the issue of BRICS currency, I think, has been taken out of context, and it's also become a political tool for some in terms of major power contestation. Now, last year, this was very rife in global media as we were preparing for summit. What was on the agenda was using a local currency for greater interaction between the BRICS countries. At no point did we have the issue of BRICS currency on the agenda, nor is it currently on the agenda. What was resolved at the Johannesburg summit last year, paragraph 45, specifically of the Johannesburg summit, where we tasked our central bank governors, finance ministers, to look at alternative payment systems, alternative payment platforms, and the use of local currency among BRICS countries, and report back to the next summit, which was the Kazan summit. And at the Kazan summit, we have seen that is still work in progress. There was also a lot of hype about de-dollarization. There is no such thing on the agenda of BRICS. The dollar will continue to be a major global currency. I don't think BRICS countries will talk about de-dollarization. It's not on the agenda, and I don't think it benefits anyone to do that. But what we are saying, and what is happening here in India and in many parts of the global south, let's start becoming more independent financially, look at our own payment platforms like you have now, trading between ourselves in local currencies, and also to find alternate payment systems, that you have one centralized system, the SWIFT system. And very often we have seen in times of strife and conflict that some countries are held hostage in terms of foreign reserves and the holdings in foreign countries. The financial holdings are frozen. They don't have access to it. We've seen it in the case of Iran. We've seen it in the case of Russia. We've seen it in the case of some African countries. This has become a political tool. So I think as you see the rise of the global south, you have other currencies becoming important. I mean, I keep reminding, as much as we speak of the power of the dollar, USA share of global trade has shrunk dramatically over the past 20, 30 years. And yet, over 50% of global trade is still conducted in dollar denomination. And yet, USA don't account for 50% of global trade. It's I think, in the region of 15, 16%. But you still have this currency, the current foreign reserves, foreign holdings today. If you look at the top 10 countries, there's only one European country that is there, that's Switzerland. All the rest are BRICS countries and countries from the global south. Well, Japan is there as well, if you regard it as part of the global north. The rest are global south countries. Your own reserves, your foreign reserves are third or fourth largest in the world. Countries are diversifying more to going back to gold and other forms of currencies. So I think it'll be quite some time if eventually you do see that. But for the foreseeable future, there's where's your central bank going to be stationed? Who's going to take charge of that to underpin that currency? All of these are complicated questions. So for now, I think we must continue in terms of local currencies. In Africa, that's happening. We created the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. So over 20 African countries are part of that. That will save Africa over $5 billion annually in terms of doing trade in local currency. Thank you.
Well, before I invite Prakash to propose a vote of thanks, may I invite PM Narayanan to present a memento to the High Commissioner. May I invite ING to present a memento to Rajiv. May I invite Dipanjan to present a memento to Mayank. Thank you. Thank you. Prakash, please propose a vote of thanks. Thank you.
On behalf of the FCC, I'm really grateful that we had such an educative, session. It was really educative, like His Excellency talking of the factor of Gandhi, and some of the components of that Gandhi factor actually, were not known to me, and I am personally grateful in that sense. And actually, I was educated. And of course, as he rightly said, that now this stage has come, one has to go beyond this Gandhi factor. And what exactly needs to be done? he has said, and something even the government of India, as Mr. Singh said, also need to be done. There are many things that need to be done. We should not be satisfied with what our cultural or historical relationship has been. And in that context, I think Ambassador Bhatia suggested two concrete measures, if I may use those words. One, of course, is this more and more, or rather, frequent. You suggested summits. You suggested summits, meeting between India and South Africa, and more joint consolidated heads up some that sort of interactions, because those gaps among those interactions have been pretty long, as even the High Commissioner pointed out. 2018, 2024, 6-7 years is a pretty long period. And in that sense, as I said, this session was really educative. And as you all know that we have a rich archive, everything that has been discussed will be put on our archive. Of course, it has been directly telecast through the social media, and we have got a very rich archive, and this will be a part of it. And in that sense, you actually have contributed so much to our intellectual capital of Foreign Correspondent Club. For that, again, on behalf of FCC, I thank you all. And I'm quite sure in future we'll have more such interactions. So thank you all again.